Hello everyone, myself Miss Saumya Grover, Assistant Professor, Jagannath University. Today we will be talking about the topic oral and written communication. It is part of different types of communication topic. Let's understand what is oral communication. Oral communication refers to spoken messages that we transmit by producing sounds. Oral communication generally involves both verbal and non-verbal symbols. Mostly, we spend a great deal of time participating in verbal communication both as speakers and listeners. Oral messages are continuous with words and sounds spoken and uttered in connected way. Oral communication is spontaneous and it is flexible. This is also one of the feature of oral communication. The way we speak, how we speak matters a lot in communication, and that is why oral communication is very important. Oral communication are the spoken words through a channel or a medium in direct or indirect form. The information here is passed only in the form of sound. The conversation is an oral mode of communication which can take place. It can be a face-to-face communication, over the phone communication, or via voice messages. All these are types of different oral communications. In oral communication, spoken words are used. The examples include face-to-face communication, speech, telephonic communication, video, radio, television, and voice over the internet. Oral communication is influenced by the pitch, loudness, tempo, and clarity, which are part of non-verbal communication. Now let's study what are the advantages of oral communication. The first advantage of oral communication is the adjustment of the message. In oral communication, the speaker gets immediate feedback from the receiver, which helps him to find out how he receives the message and how he reacts to it. The immediate feedback not only lets the communicator to know the kind of response from the receiver, but it also helps him to modify his message in such a way that it becomes readily and favorably acceptable to the receiver. Immediate clarifications. The communicator can clarify certain ideals in his message which are not properly understood by the receiver or which might leave some doubts in his mind. These doubts or the queries of the receiver arise from the defective message, and these are communicated to the receiver in the form of feedback. Time. Oral messages can be transmitted through telephone almost immediately, whereas the written message takes a lot more time to reach up the receiver by post. The written message takes comparatively longer time because it may require consulting, dictating, drafting, typing, posting, etc., which is the oral transmission does not require. When immediate action is required, the oral communication is the best media. The next advantage is the persuasion and control. The speaker can judge the replies of the other party and can change his arguments in such a way that thereby he can influence the attitudes, feelings, opinions, and beliefs of the receiver. The oral directives and instructions are effective in controlling the employees and the situations in order to ensure the fulfillment of the objectives. Formality. Oral communication is less formal than the written communication. Informal talks can help in building friendships and personal relations between the communicator and the receiver. The cost. Oral communication is not as costly a process as that of the written correspondence, especially when the message is to be communicated within the organization. Now let's read about the disadvantages of oral communication. The first disadvantage of oral communication is future reference. The oral message cannot be referred back in future if they are not tape recorded, as compared to written messages. Oral messages do not constitute permanent record. Therefore, it has little or no value for legal procedures. It cannot become legal evidence in case of future disputes or lawsuits. Speaker's preparedness. Oral communication cannot be good and effective if the communicator is not a good speaker. He requires to be lively, enthusiastic, vital, earnest, and keenly interested in the subject. Lengthy message. Oral communication is not a suitable media for any lengthy official message that constitutes minute details. Distortion. The oral message is more likely to be received in a distorted meaning by the receiver due to his misunderstanding and misinterpretation of it. It is found that people tend to have trouble in recalling correctly the main ideas and factual details which are communicated to them orally. Retaining the message. It is found that people tend to have trouble in recalling proper the main ideas of the factual details which are communicated to them orally. Due to imbalanced mental state of the listener or due to listening barriers, the receiver may not understand the message completely and he may even forget the major part of the message after a long time. The best example of oral and written communication can be our online classes. Whatever I am saying to you can be understood in a better way when I am explaining it to you. But for your exam point of view, for your examination purpose, you will have to study your notes, your books, your study material, self-learning material so that you can learn the things. So both oral and written communication have their differences and both of them are important part of communication. Written communication obviously means communication through written or printed words. Written communication is more formal and literate and follows rules of grammar strictly. The written media is like the human sensory organs and memory power, which receives, analyzes, and records the information for the purpose of decision making in the future. Written media helps to coordinate the knowledge and work of the staff specialists and the research specialists. There is need for accurate written information to carry our management and other professional duties. The main purpose of written communication is to move, motivate, and mold the minds and behavior of the people. So it is necessity for the communicator to study the minds of people he wishes to target through his writing. It must be remembered that the art and skill of writing depends on the competence and knowledge of the communicator. Besides all this, the communicator should prevent his feelings from dictating his thinking and should organize his thoughts which are based on factual information. Written communication is when information is delivered in the written form, letters, emails, research reports, handbooks, or posters. Even flyers or posts on social media are also considered written communication. In written communication, written signs or symbols are used to transmit information. A handwritten message might be typed or handwritten, Messages can be sent via email, letter, report, note, and other kinds of written communication. The message in written communication is influenced by the vocabulary and grammar used, as well as the writing style, precision, and clarity of the language used. The most popular mode of corporate communication is written communication. As a result, it's considered one of the most valuable commercial talents. Now, what are the advantages of written communication? The first advantages of written communication, which is also a disadvantage of oral communication, is the permanent record. As we already As we already are aware that written messages can be kept in files as a permanent record of the general, like the affairs, transactions, and agreements of the business organization. It remains as an evidence of the company's performance, which is useful for future references. It forms a basis for new policy decisions and also for the fresh measures for the development and expansion of the business legal evidence. Written message provides tangible evidence of the agreements signed between the two particles. It also gives a proof of the stages in which the transaction was carried out. It can show how the mistakes were committed in carrying out the transactions by either of the parties involved in it. Accuracy. Usually, the written messages are organized more carefully than the spoken messages. The communicator uses standard languages and tries to avoid colloquial words and expressions. As compared to oral messages, the written messages are more accurate in grammatical structures. Accuracy in languages helps to prevent any misunderstanding or misinterpretation of the message. Lengthy messages. Written media is especially more suited for lengthy and complicated messages. The receiver can read it rapidly till he properly understands it. Secondly, it assures retaining every vital detail if the lengthy and complicated message. Correspondence. Postal correspondence has given a really wide access to written media. This facility is available to almost all the communicators and receivers in the nooks and corners of the world. Limitations of written communication. The first disadvantage of written communication is access to literates. The access of the written media is limited to the literates only. There are millions of illiterate people who cannot use this media. Costly and time-consuming process. A number of people get involved in the process of collecting information, consulting, drafting, typing, and posting the messages. It takes the total cost of a business letter to not less than 20 rupees. Secondly, the oral message reaches almost instantaneously on the telephone, whereas a letter may reach to the receiver after 2 to 3 days. That's why it is a very time-consuming process. Delayed feedback. The communicator has to wait for the reply from the receiver in oral communication. The feedback is almost immediate in oral communication. But in written communication, it is, as we know, that it is time consuming. So the message is sent to the receiver from the sender. It takes time. And after that, the receiver takes the message and then gives the feedback, which is basically a time consuming process which delays this communication. Thank you very much.